All right, testing, testing. We are here for the final part of a three-part conversation I had with my boy Justin Clark. You can find him all over the interwebs at jclarkreal. He's a really good follow into the business side of things. And I am more into the philosophical side of things. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, but that's why podcasts were invented. So this is the Untitled Podcast. Again, we are going to be talking about hip hop and how it intersects with culture, technology, fashion, and finally a little bit about what we feel is the future of this amazing art form. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this presentation of the Untitled Podcast with me, your host, Tasso, and Justin Clark. I think we're recording. I think we're back. I think this is the moment the people have been waiting for. I know I've been waiting. It's been daylight savings slash time differences have pushed this episode back a couple weeks, but it's all right because we're here now for that part three hip hop talks. How you doing, Jay Clark?
Straight, brother. Yeah, daylight savings had us in a rut for a second, but we got things worked out. We thought daylight savings happened the same time where we are, but that is not true. It's not true.
No, man, it's weird. I don't know who's in charge of all this stuff, but yeah, our daylight savings, as in UK's daylight savings, starts next week. You all started, I think, last week, so it's a
Mm.
little bit of a hiccup there, but we all good. I think last week we ended on talking about some of the things with hip hop and culture and a little bit of the gender role, the activism role. Now I kind of want to push the conversation forward to what about the technological component of culture? What about the fashion component of culture? And maybe even the most important part of culture is language. I heard, I think it was Saint John. He's that rapper that has like the weird hair. He came out with Roses a few years ago, and it was one of his biggest songs. But he's really intriguing as a like a personality. Like his interviews are really insightful. And one of the things he said is, whenever you learn something deep enough, it becomes a language. And essentially, I learned the language of music. And so I can communicate in this realm. If you learn the language of business or marketing or whatever, then you can speak that with other people who know that language more effectively. You could, and so essentially, he was trying to break down different domains into languages. And I think that that could be an interesting way to view hip hop. But first, I want to pop off the question to you. How do you think rap and technology intersect today? And maybe that's a high level question. You can drill down however you please, but what is the sort of, I don't know, where do those things overlap and where do you see those things moving in the future?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is exposure and accessibility. I think hip hop, music in general, anyone can kind of blow up. Anyone can have a hit song just because of the viral, type of space that we're in. So technology plays a huge role in it. There's like online labels now. You can just join these programs, these services, these apps, membership groups that will push your music out versus just remaining truly independent. So there's a lot going on in music. I don't want to name any of those companies. I don't want to give them too much credit because I hear a lot of good and bad about it. But
Yeah.
technology as a whole just provides a new wave of exposure and accessibility for any up and coming artist. You know what I'm saying?
I heard a quote that says something like, any tool or technology, if sufficiently developed, should be indistinguishable from magic. I'm messing that up, but it's something to the
Mm.
degree of good technology should be, it should work in a way that almost defies, like it shouldn't be like you shouldn't be able to explain it simply. It should kind of, and I don't know how much I agree with that now that I'm saying it out loud, but I feel like it's one of those ideas that talks to the degree of, uh, what would you say, like the power that is in technology, because it's not something that we think of technology today as like these devices, right? Like we have these phones, we have smart tech, computers, watches, all that stuff, and that is technology. But technology is really anything that moves us forward in terms of how we interact with the world. So the printing press was new technology, right? Like
You know who's a big name in hip hop that's underrated as far as his
Right.
impact in technology.
Who's this?
Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy should
Ooh,
be
that's a good name.
directly related. He brought tech to hip hop, like from YouTube to
Yeah.
his different business ventures. Like even his people laughed at the video game, but that was a that was a new idea in hip hop. People making whole video game systems. Like that's serious, man. Soldier Boy underrated on the tech side, on the marketing side too. Pure
I think he's
relevancy.
starting to get his flowers though, even if he was giving it to himself. But he's starting to get known more for at least being recognized because he really did pop off the whole social media wave, especially this whole TikTok generation we're in now. Like that started with him. Like everything in terms of dancing, virality, weird,
Was you in
like
the Was
low
you in the
effort songs that blow up.
Crosswire, LimeWire
Oh
era
my
with
goodness.
downloading? Oh, Soldier, bro. Every
Yo,
version of Crank That was on that, bro. Every
LimeWire had it
Crank That,
going,
every
yo. It was cracking on LimeWire. I'm not gonna lie. Like they had my
bro.
mom's computer, and I'm not gonna say my computer. My mom had us probably so many viruses from that thing. But the fact is, you could find anything, yo. Like you would definitely have
That's
some
what's
like
crazy.
overhyped DJ yelling at the beginning for about 30 seconds, but then you get to the tune and it's cool. You got all right,
That's
free
a fact.
MP3s.
That's a fact.
That was a time. That was a beautiful time. Now we
Hmm.
got these streaming services, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I think that that's another part we got to talk about in terms of technology because streaming is the way that people access the music now. That's how they access the art form. Most people don't.
Hmm.
I mean, and I do want to preface this by saying I think, and it's not just I think, I know there's a big push in terms of analog coming back into vogue. So things like record players and stuff like that. People are starting to become more uh, interested in, whether it's just having a collection or listening to the crackles of the whatever. Like they like being able to collect music in that way. But overall, for most people, they have no deep relationship with artists. It's really just with a platform, and that platform then has all of these artists under an umbrella. I think that people have favorite
Ooh,
artists, but most of
good
the time
point.
you playlist hop, or you try to find whatever is hot now. Like, is there still that because of technology and because of the immediacy of the modern age and everything being, ADHD geared toward, do we still have the bandwidth even for albums, bro? Like, or like in-depth music videos? Like, are we just in the age of 15-second clips? Like, are
Mm.
we
Real
actually?
life,
Go ahead.
a real life example. It's crazy you brought that up. My daughter, I was showing her the other day. I had 808s and Heartbreak,
Hmm.
the CD though,
Okay.
and she was looking at the case. She thought it looked cool. Showed her the back of it. Showed her reflection in the CD, and she was so impressed. She's like, "That's so cool."
Wow.
Like, but you would buy CDs and records of like music and artists that you actually related to.
Mhm.
But in the streaming era, it's just so much music that you're not necessarily you're buying what's put in front of you. You're buying what you
What's
choose
on your
to
feed?
consume in a general basis. You know what I mean?
I think
But
it's interesting
you
they
was
call it
buying
a
a
feed too.
CD. You said a feed.
'Cause that's what we consuming. You know,
Eh,
it's wild out
eh,
here, bro. I feel like, and you're right because there's so much out there, and that's the same. It's like a derivative of the too much information era. Like everything is at our fingertips, and the same thing is in terms of art, in terms of music. A lot of it is just like it's like saturates every single space, and so before where you would come in contact with a few pieces of class, like what they would call classics, and those would be kind of the soundtracks to your existence. Now it's like there's so many potential experiences out there that it almost feels wrong to limit yourself. Like you almost want to touch everything,
mm,
but is that healthy and is it even necessary? Like, I don't know. Like that's a question I guess for the viewer. Let's push that out there. What do y'all think about rap and technology? Like, do you feel like it's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of how it's beginning to spread? I think that there are good aspects and bad aspects. One of the good ones is that I don't know if you saw that stem player that Kanye was pushing. I think that that's a really cool
Hmm.
way to start integrating. Like that was like the next jump from the iPod. Like we haven't had a real jump since the iPod. It used to be hitting like, you had the Walkman and the Discman and the mobile and then the iPod and then there's like the iPod in like around 2000 and then it just kind of stalled out in terms of music specific interfaces. It just kind of melted all into one device that we call the smartphone. But I feel like it's going to be interesting to see if that can maybe start to separate again in the future and there's a little bit more specialization with tools and things like that. But anyway, without beating the dead horse and getting too deep on that part, I do want to move on in terms of the relationship between rap and fashion. Um, the Latin word for fashion, the word where it comes from is to form or to make. It's like facio or something like that. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's this word that means to make, and I think it's really it's a reflection of what it really means is a concept. It's a reflection. It's an expression, and fashion or expression and rap are like the same thing. And so it makes sense that those would become very, very similar. And we talked, you mentioned it actually last week, or maybe two episodes ago, that what we wear is what people like start to buy. Like we have a commercial impact in
Hmm.
that regard. Like, a lot of the fashion trends are set by people of color. And so, or at least people in hip hop. And so, how do you think about that in terms of what we push, how it moves? I think you asked the question of is this a good relationship and how have fashion trends moved now and in the future in terms of what we use or what we view as hip hop?
Well, hip hop will continue to set the fashion trend, and two brands and two shoes come to mind.
Mm,
It's Nike and Air Force Ones, and Adidas and shell toes. But Adidas in general now because of Yeezy. Like
mm,
hip hop truly sets the standard. When I first like at every stage of accomplishment in my life, when I was young,
yeah.
I got two pairs of Air Force Ones, white and black, low tops.
Yes,
Every
sir.
time. When I got my first paycheck on the job, two pairs of ones. When I got my first refund check, two
Yes,
pairs of
sir.
ones. Like, bruh, Nelly told me to. Like, that's how impressionable I was
Wow.
back then. Like, that's hip hop.
That's really interesting. I think, wow, I feel like it's almost it becomes a not just a status symbol, but it integrates itself into the culture. Like Nike is now part of the culture. And like
Facts.
it's a brand and it's a
Facts.
commercial entity and it's an organization, but it also has a mind of its own within this mind or mindset, whatever, of modern culture. And I feel like that's a really interesting thing. Like once you can identify what that value is, like where do you start
Mm.
talking about being compensated? maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I feel like look, we pushing a lot of stuff, yo. A lot of even if you talk about things that we see in not rap, like talk about uh everyone knows Elvis stole all his moves, right? Like it's not just hip hop. It's the fact that as a culture we have birthed so much and get so little credit, and it's just a little. It's kind of like how do you come on?
Nike. Well, Nike is publicly seemingly indebted to black people in a way because every time there's a social movement or
Yeah,
instance, Nike is one of the first brands to jump in. And I wanted to say like of all the money that Nike's made off of black faces and black brands, black athletes, black musicians, how much is truly going back to black people? But they've thrown around a ton of sponsorship dollars. You know what I'm saying? They've thrown around a ton of contractual dollars to black people. They've built some, basketball courts across the country. I'm sure they got some money invested in some schools. So I can't really take much from Nike. Adidas, I won't speak on too much because I don't see them that much in that regard. But I at least give Nike a little credit in social issues and community investment. I've seen Nike a lot more active than say
that's
Adidas.
interesting.
You know what
I
I
think
mean?
that's true. They kind of. they kicked off this whole social movement or social justice warrior movement with Colin Kaepernick. Um, so
Facts.
you're right
He
about
did.
that. I think it's interesting too how fashion tends to become this elitist thing when in reality a lot of the trends start from the ground. It's almost like it's like I even see I don't know if they're parodies or if it's real, but you see some fashion shows nowadays where the clothes they're wearing look like it's like homeless people. And it's like and then you'll have rich folks that pay a lot to wear these brands or whatever. So to me it's just like
Hmm.
fashion as individual expression is boiled down into what we wear, and that can sometimes send a message. I think hip hop as expression is boiled into what you say, and that has its own type of expression. And there is this when those things kind of clash, that's when you have like people making statements with their clothing, or like when folks do specific stuff like like wear black or Ye with the face mask or Jay Z with the Basquiat hair or like people doing different stuff to show a different expression of their evolution. And I feel like the way hip hop moves in that space is essentially the way it moves in any other space. Behind the scenes, but also out in front. It's like a sandwich. It's like you have the trendiness of it, but then you also have like the undergirding of it, what actually makes it go. So I don't think the two are always in concert. And maybe this is getting a little bit too pie in the sky or like not concrete, but I'm just trying to think of how rap is. I'm trying to like pin it down in a way. Maybe it can't be pinned down. Maybe that's why I'm having a problem. But
Hmm.
anyway, this is kind of a good segue anyway, because I'm thinking of ways to pin it down in terms of words. And words are inherently limited. I had a good friend one time tell me that words are the shaky bridge we send our thoughts out onto. And it's really just these ideas that we put sounds around, and then we say, okay, hopefully means the same thing in your head as it does in my head. Otherwise, you might have a problem. And
Hmm.
so, what do you think of the rap or the impact of rap on language and communication? So we talk about slang, we talk about dialects, we talk about just ebonics in general. A lot of that is influenced by the trends we see. Like I'm living in the UK now, and a lot of the way the kids speak, a lot of the way how they would say the youth speak, is based on the grime scene, the hip hop scene that's out here in the UK. That's influenced how everybody talks. Little white kids and little black kids. They all have the same kind of uh yeah, yeah. Like they have the same not the same inflection, but they have the same slang, and it all came from well, originally it came from the Caribbean because there's all these islanders that moved to the UK back in like the early 2000s, their kids started growing up, started gangbanging, started rapping, started entertaining. And now what how they talk is now how white kids today talk. And I think it's just the craziest like weird thing, like this reverse influence that happens just from you just import a culture and see how it starts to change the way people interact. And I think hip hop is I mean, look at most hip hop concerts. I mean, the faces in the crowd are mostly white.
That, that's why it goes back to like a season of growth for me because at some point in your path of wokeness, you may get offended by that people like pull from your culture or try to mimic it. And who's to say it's your culture anyway? Like we're just a part
Mm,
of it, you know, we're just a piece of it.
that's a good point.
So growth and maturity tells me it's just like for one, I'm just a piece of that culture, so it's not like we're gatekeepers of it. And two, it's somewhat like flattery. It's like I tell you, it's cool that they want to be like people that look like us. That tells us we're in a good place. So we shouldn't ever feel like we're second class if the quote unquote first class does everything to mimic us and be like us and aspire to be next to us. You know, who doesn't want a token black friend? Let's be honest. They
But
love
then
it.
it
Like
becomes
you
a
know what I mean?
commodity though. You don't think that becomes it becomes exclusively it's not like they love you, they just like you. it's like something like where like he can hang for now
meaning
because we think he's funny. Like I don't know if I like that. Maybe that's not the right metaphor, but it's like as the dominant power as this structure in culture is almost like okay, y'all can play the court jester. Like I think Tyler says this a lot. Like why you always put me in the rap urban category? Like I want to be known as an artist. Like when I started doing Loiter Squad and people knew me as that funny guy, I was like, oh shit, I got to stop because now
but to say they're dominant is perception.
no no no
Like
no
I
no no
don't
no
call
it's not
them
no it's not no it's
dominant.
not no
I
it's not
just
no it's
said,
not. I'm just talking about wealth.
what do you
Accumulate
mean?
wealth in society. Wealth, resources, land, all that. That's there's a clear divide between who has and who has not. That's all I'm talking about.
Well, it's easier to impact one yourself
What
than
you mean?
the masses. So it's, I mean, if that's your perception, that's your reality. But it's a lot easier to change that about yourself than it is to change that about anyone outside of yourself.
You mean
But
what
that's a
the
little,
reality is, or what do you?
yeah. Because if you say they're the dominant majority or whatever it may
Right,
be, we know we're talking about principally. Like we're speaking very surface right now, but we know we're talking about principally. If you accept that as truth, then it is truth. But if you see yourself as a dominant person or a dominant piece
right.
of culture, society, whatever you want to label it, then that is
But
also
you can
true.
also see. I don't think those are mutually exclusive because I see myself as the best in any arena I enter. But at the same time, I don't see. I don't. That doesn't negate the fact that I see the fact that you have fiscally more than I do. You have more resources. That's why sometimes I get mad because I'm like, why are you not
But
doing?
but they want what we but they want what we have. So that should tell you something inherently. If they have all this stuff,
Yeah,
but they still want to be like us, then what are we truly
but
lacking?
that's why I feel like it should be
Other
more of a
than
symbiotic relationship.
the
Why don't we accept that there are differences and love each other anyway? But I feel like we're caught up in this space where we have to either be colorblind or we have to pretend that there's no differences or we have to play up the differences in a race baity way where it's all about like being the dominant. When I say dominant, I don't mean as in like I mean okay, maybe that was the wrong word. I would say the more what let's just say let's keep with the facts. So the wealthier segment of society in terms of the fiscal wealth. I would say that there is a direct
hmm
correlation between gang violence, murder, and general hoodlum activity and positive you're in the green in your books in terms of people who own whether it's private prisons, whether it's all the stores and food and liquor everywhere in the city, whether it's you're talking about gun sales, you're talking about drug sales, you're talking about all the biggest exports everywhere. You have to make sure the image remains that this is a dis essentially this is what you are. If you have any elevation in consciousness to where you realize that that isn't you, those products will not appeal to you. Even more so, you won't even be servicing those prisons. So there is an incentive, I'm saying, for
hmm
people who have the resources, i.e., the record labels, to sell a version of rap that is not beneficial to the culture. And maybe this can move to the last point because we moving up towards that 23, 24 minute. I want to keep these to about half an hour to respect folks' time, but let's get into the future of hip hop because at the end of the day, we could go back and forth about what it is now, but what can it be and what should it be in terms of how it impacts
mm
culture, how it impacts the world, and how it ultimately impacts bottom lines, because that is what we talking about, man. Like, unfortunately, it has to be had. It's a conversation that has to be had because of the fact that there is so much money being made off of it. If it was something that it was just like for fun, everybody was doing it as expression purely, like that facio Latin word of creating just to create, fine. But the reality is that a lot of people are making a
mm.
lot of dollars off of these. So, what's the future of rap look like to you, Mr. Justin Clark?
Yeah, yep. It's hard to project because there's so
Yeah.
many factors in it. But my hope, and I do think it's current with the trend, is that we've seen the climax of the uglies of hip hop. I hope either we've seen it or we're in it.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? It's rappers, bro. It's rappers dropping like
Yeah, it's bad out
crazy.
here.
Like it's nuts. So to me, it can't get much worse. And I'm hoping that we've seen the worst of it or we're at the worst of it, and hip hop can start to almost repair itself to that true
Mm.
art form. Because there's so many opportunities to be heard, no one has to fake anymore. You ain't gotta fit no there was a time where you had to fit what hip hop was, and then that became regional. So you had, if you was from Chicago, you had to fit a rapper from Chicago. If you was from New York, you had to fit that. If you was in LA, you had to fit that. Now, whatever type of music you serving, you can reach with the audience. You don't have to fake. You don't have to fake nothing. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping hip hop is returning to that art form slowly but surely. I think Brother Ye is gonna be heavily involved in that. I think Ye curved hip hop with the albums that he dropped. That was 2020, maybe 2020, 20. Nah, that was earlier than that, like 2017, 2018. When he produced, I think 4 or 5 albums, and he dropped his own album titled Ye.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That changed because we had Death of Auto Tune with we had Death of Auto Tune with Hove. That was a curve in hip hop. I feel like that album was like that summer was the second part of that. This was death of just trash
Mm.
music. Cause Jay came back with hella albums. He produced some. He
Yeah.
had his own. It
I
changed
remember
hip
that.
hop
Yeah,
like
he like
straight up.
produced
It changed the
like
whole
Nas and Tiana Taylor
curvature of
and
bad
and a
music.
bunch of folks. Push, yeah,
Pusha
yeah.
T.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. I think he did one
Oh
with
yeah,
Cuddy
Kissy
too. Kid
Ghost.
Cuddy.
R.I.P. to the Cuddy relationship. I don't know what happened with
Facts.
that, bro. That was weird. But things happen.
Man.
But
Dope
bro,
album though.
I feel like that's a really good point. And I feel like the fact is that there's so much opportunity to be heard now that you don't necessarily have to pretend. You can be yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like you can, but now the question is, who are
Yeah.
you? Right? Because we've been faking for so long as a culture that people don't even know who they are. So when they say be yourself, folks are like, what? They just keep acting. They keep doing the thing because that's what they're
Mm.
used to. So it's like, what do you mean be myself? Who the fuck am I? So it's like, all right, now we got to do the hard work of, you know, drilling down. And this is that spiritual talk, getting down to the core of who you really are and what you were put here for. So ultimately, I feel like once we tap into that, the art becomes easy because at the end of the day, I keep coming back to that Latin word of faccio. It's expression, it's work, it's creation. It should be an overflow because when you express something, you're not trying to imitate, you're not trying to objectify, you're not even trying to mimic. You're literally just expressing what already is. It's like the sun shining. It doesn't have to try harder, it just is. So when you are who you just are, and that emanates, and people feel that. And I feel that's what you're talking about, getting back to the core of what hip hop really is as a form of expression, as a form of revelation, as a form of information. We got to get back to the truth. We got to get back to basics. Ultimately, we just got to get back to what is real. And when that comes back, I feel like Nas might make another record saying hip hop is alive. Maybe, who knows? I rule the day.
Yo.
But
That's what's up.
anyway, this was part 3 of a 3-part conversation. If you feel it, please smash the like button, leave a subscribe, comment, maybe give some other ideas about what we could talk about in the future. I'm gonna start doing interviews with other folks as well. Justin is a very busy man, and we both are trying to get in touch as much as we can, just because I feel like we have really good conversations. But if you start seeing other faces pop up, no, it's not anything. We just continuing to build and make some new inroads into this media landscape of 2023 and beyond. So if you have any ideas, leave comments. Follow the man's at J Clark Real, REEL. Follow me at Tossal Philosophy. We about to get it cracking all rest of the year. Any last words for the people?
Yeah, it's been fun, man. We might
Yeah,
kick this bucket again, but we also gotta dive into
yeah,
something else. You know, similar style, different topic. We'll check it
for
out.
sure.
See what we come up with.
You know what? Maybe I don't know this because we did a brief overview of hip hop. I feel like there's so much more. Like if we even if we revisited the same topics in like a year's time, we could make even better content. I feel like at that point too, it's one of those things where if we just keep iterating, who knows? I think you briefly mentioned in the beginning maybe this will be a book, maybe because there's so much that we can make off this, bro. And it's not just like I feel like people's understanding of what rap is oftentimes it's like filtered through what somebody on a screen says or a brief interaction with a radio hit that they might not like or maybe one that they do like and they think everything is like that, but it really is, I think, the most powerful force on the planet, um besides God.
Mm.
Hip hop is the most powerful force on the planet.
Say
I
on the
think it has the
planet.
potential to be, bro, because what
On the
it
planet.
does, it amplifies who you already are. You already are that swaggy individual who knows that they know and wants to show the world who they are. But you just don't have the confidence yet. What hip hop does, it infuses that confidence, but you have to have the skill, right? So it's practice, makes perfect, makes good, makes confident. And then imagine you have a world full of people who all know that they are the greatest and not in an egotistical way. Because I think we think of that as like, I'm better than you. But it's like, on this specific timeline that I'm in, I am doing what I can to be the best version of myself. And you, because you are outside of my experience, I can't experience through your eyes. I'm never going to defer and say you have some dominion over me, but we can collaborate. We can work together. We can exchange ideas. Shit, we can make money together. Why we got to be in this exploitative one over the other relationship? And that's what I fight against. So for me, it's one of those things where if everybody has that same mentality, then we don't even have to be worried about weird stuff anymore. We can just be real with each other and get to that bag with each other at the end of the day. But hey, beautiful talking with you. We'll get into it another time.
Word.
Much love. Have a good one, everybody. And thanks for watching.